So in this video we're going to look at order of operations, and basically order of operations just the order in which we do the math. Okay, now there's an acronym that we can use to memorize this. An acronym that we use, let me switch off of this, is P E M, and actually let me make myself more room, so P E M slash D, and then A/S. Well, we do PEMDAS or PEMDAS. Okay, so that's what we use to memorize order of operations. Now, here's what each part stands for. So the P is going to be parentheses, and let me make sure I spell this right because my spelling is spotty at times. So the parenthesis plus any grouping symbols. So that could be like brackets or I don't know, absolute value, stuff like that. Okay, so grouping symbols. All right. The E stands for exponents, or what also fits into exponents technically is square roots. But I don't know. You could see square root as a grouping symbol, but technically I see it as an exponent. So I'll say square root. I don't even know if you'll see any of these. That may be too advanced. But I'm sure we're going to come across it at some point. Okay? Now, these next two, the MD and the AS, now it's obvious what they stand for. However, the rules for these two actually change a little bit. So the multiplying and dividing go together. So once again, M is multiplying, the D is just dividing. Okay? Now, you do this from left to right, as if you're reading a sentence. Okay? So the order in which you do multiplying and dividing can change depending on the order that you see it. So read the equation or the expression like a sentence, and you're going to do the multiplication from left to right, whichever one comes first, which we'll look at examples and that will be more clear. And then the AS is adding and subtracting, and it's the same thing. We have to do this from left to right. So sometimes you'll add first, sometimes you'll subtract first. It all depends on which one comes first when you're going from left to right. Okay? So once again, PEMDAS will help you with your order of operations. Now, a lot of times you can do if you have a calculator, you can pretty much just plug everything in the calculator. But you still have to know order of operations even when you're plugging into the calculator, because sometimes the calculator needs certain parentheses or a certain setup to do it. So it's always good to know order of operations. I always get people that say, I have a calculator, why do I need order of operations? Plugging it in has to be done a certain way according to the order of operations. So let's do some examples. We'll just call this one, I don't know, let's just write it and we'll do it. So 7 plus 54 divided by 3 times 2. Okay, so now I want you to simplify this. So the directions will say something like simplify. Which, let me make sure I spelled that right. Yeah, or it'll say something like, which I probably misspelled that. It may say evaluate. So we could also evaluate. Now, once again, let's use our order of operations expression or acronym PEMDAS. Okay, so first thing we want to do is look for parentheses. Now, you'll see a parentheses here. However, what we're really wanting to do is evaluate or break down or simplify what's ever in the parentheses. So if you look in this parentheses, there's just a 2. So that 2 can't be broken down any further. So now we can move on. Now, if it were parentheses like 2 plus 5, we would do 2 plus 5. But since it's just a 2 in that parentheses, we're good to move on. So parentheses is done. Let's check exponents. 7 doesn't have an exponent. 54 doesn't have an exponent, nor does 3 or 2, so we're good with the exponents. Now, we have to do this M and D, remember, from the left to the right. So we have addition, we have dividing, and then we have multiplying here. So which one are we going to do first? Well, first of all, we know the multiplying and dividing comes first. Which one, if we read this from left to right, which one do we see first, dividing or multiplying? We see dividing first. And actually what we're dividing is 54 divided by 3. So that's what we have to do first. So 7 comes down, this times 2 comes down, 54 divided by 3 is going to give me a positive 18. So now what I have is, let me put it closer together to make it look nicer. I have 7 plus 54 divided by 3 is 18 times 2. So now we're done with the dividing, so we can do the multiplication, because multiplication happens before addition. So 18 times 2 is what we're going to do next, and 18 times 2 is 36. So now we have 7 plus 36, and we only have addition left to do. So now we've done the multiplying, we've done the dividing. Now the last step, adding and subtracting, we do that from left to right, but it doesn't really matter here because there's only adding. So now we're going to add 7 plus 36 to give us 43. And we're finished. All right, let's do another one. Let's do, let's make this a little bit harder. Let's do a fraction. Let's do one big fraction. Let's make it significantly harder for some of you. Well, no, let's do this. How about we do, you try this one, and I would pause before every one we do and try them on your own, but see if you can do this one. So once again, we want to evaluate this, and you want to use order of operations. So once again, P, E, M, D, A, S. All right. So what are we going to do first? So let's look for parentheses first. I don't see any parentheses. You shouldn't either, unless maybe you're hallucinating. But we're done with that part. Do we have any exponents? Yeah, we do. We have 4 squared. Now, here's what you have to watch out for on this. Act like this 4 is in parentheses. This minus sign doesn't have anything to do with that exponent 2. So this is just 4 squared, so this minus sign is going to come down. So 24 comes down, minus 4 squared is 16 times 3 plus 15. Now we've handled the exponent, so let's go to the multiplying and dividing. Well, we only have multiplication, and once again, you could do this a couple different ways. I would just do it this way. Treat 16 and 3 like their own little piece, and you can even put brackets around it. And just leave out this minus sign for now. So the minus sign is going to come down. 16 times 3 is going to give me 48 plus 15. So now we're done with all the multiplying and dividing. Actually, let me do it like this. And here's where things can get confusing. I have to do the adding and subtracting next. Now, a lot of people will do the adding first because they'll say, well, PEMDAS is AS, so A comes before S. The adding comes before subtraction. But that's not true. We have to do adding and subtracting from left to right. So, which one comes first when we go from the left to the right on this expression? Does the subtraction come first or the adding? Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious. The subtraction comes first. So, we actually have to do this first, then we'll add 15. So 24 minus 48, which gives me negative 24. Now I'm going to add 15, and then I'll be finished. So negative 24 plus 15 is negative 9, and that's our answer. Let's do a couple more. Maybe one more, we'll see. All right, let's make it a little bit harder. I'm going to make one big fraction. So 7 minus 2, and that 2 actually needs to be squared, so let me bring this down a little bit. 7 minus 2, and the 2 is squared. We end our parentheses, plus 17 over negative 14 plus 2 times 5. All right, so once again, let's try to go through our order of operations. So P-E-M-D-A-S. Now, if you see one big fraction, start with the top and the bottom and do them separately and divide at the end. So if you have one big fraction, so I'll write it, let's just do, let's say, simplify top. So simplify, if I could spell, simplify top and bottom, then divide. Okay, seems a little weird, I know, but that's just the easiest way to do these. Okay, so let's simplify the top first and the bottom, and then we'll go from there. So let's start with the top. Do we see parentheses on the top? Yeah, we do. Now, inside of that parentheses, we need to break down all of this first. Okay, but within that, we have another set of order of operations, and this is where things get tricky. So let me say all that again. On the top, we have parentheses right here. But inside of those parentheses, there's also two operations going on. So we have to use order of operations inside the parentheses. I know that's confusing, but that's just how it works. So we have 7 minus 2, but the 2 is squared. So which one do we do first, subtraction or an exponent? Well, we do the exponent first. So we're going to say 7 minus, what's 2 squared? Because once again, treat this 2 like it's in parentheses and leave out the negative or the minus sign. 2 squared is just 4. So we have 7 minus 4 in parentheses plus 17. So that's going to be our top part. But let's go ahead and work on the bottom part as well while we're doing this. So let's look at the bottom. What should we do first on the bottom? We have adding and we have multiplication. Which one comes first with our order of operations? It's the multiplication. So we're going to do 2 times 5 first. So negative 14 comes down, plus 2 times 5 is 10. All right, so now let's start this process over. And I'm actually going to get rid of some of this just so we can make things clear. So let's do that. We had 7 minus 4. What do we have? Plus 17? Yeah, plus 17 all over negative 14 plus 10. Okay, let's go back to the top. Once again, we're doing order of operations. So on the top, do we still have parentheses? Yeah, we do. We have 7 minus 4. Now, the good thing is there's only a subtraction sign here, so we can just say 7 minus 3 and then bring that part down. So 7 minus 3 gives me, or 7 minus 4 gives me 3. My bad, I'm losing my mind. Okay, so we have 3 plus 17. Now, let's go ahead and take care of this bottom part. What operation do we have? Adding. So there's no real questions. All we have to do is add. Negative 14 plus 10 is negative 4. Now, the bottom is essentially done. The top, however, is not done quite yet, though. But the good thing is we only have adding. So 3 plus 17 is going to give me 20. So this is 20 over negative 4. Now, the last step, if you have one big fraction, is to divide. And what's 20 divided by negative 4? It's going to give me negative 5. So we're finished. All right. Let's look at, how about we do, let's just do one more. I'm going to do a pretty big one just so you can see how big some of these can get. But don't get discouraged if maybe this one doesn't go your way. But it's still good to see some of the harder problems just so you can get an idea of what it looks like. All right, so let's do this. Let's say we have, let's do 12. Then we're going to have a bracket. I'll tell you what that means in a second. 30 minus, parentheses, 9 plus 4 squared, end our bracket, all over absolute value, which let's do it in the same color. Absolute value 10 minus the absolute value negative 6. All right, now, once again, let's go through our order of operations. And if you have a fraction, once again, divide as your last step. So we're going to break down the top and the bottom and divide at the very end. So let's start with the top. Now, these brackets are actually grouping symbols. They work the same way as a parentheses would work. So when we are looking at this problem, it essentially is telling us do all of this on the inside first. Then we'll multiply by 12. Because if 12 is right outside of this, that means we're multiplying by 12. So once again, if you see brackets, you have to do everything in that bracket. All right? So let's look inside the brackets. What do we have going on? We have subtraction. We have actually a parentheses in the bracket, so we're actually going to narrow our focus down even more and do what's in this parentheses in the bracket, and then look inside of that and you'll see addition and an exponent. So we basically brought this all the way down to saying, okay, we need to make the decision, add or exponent, which one is it? And it's going to be the exponent. Okay, I know that's a lot to follow, but once again, I want you to see a very hard one just so you can see how crazy this can get. So our parentheses, 9 plus, we're going to do 4 squared, which is 16. Okay, now let's go ahead and look at the bottom. Okay, and actually, let's make this very obvious that we're moving to a different position now. All right, so now let's look at the bottom. On the bottom, we have 2 separate absolute value symbols, so let's go ahead and do those first. Okay, we want the absolute value of 10, which is just 10, minus, what's the absolute value of negative 6? Well, that's just 6. All right, so now, after doing our first round of order of operations, this is what we're left with. Now, I'm going to rewrite all this just so we can be on the same page, and it can be a lot nicer looking. So 12, our bracket, 30 minus 9 plus 16, our bracket, all over, what did we say, 10 minus 6. Okay, so now let's go back to the top. So on the top, once again, the brackets have to be done before anything else, and then inside of that, the parentheses have to be done before anything else. So we actually want to add 9 plus 16 first. So let's do that. So we have 12, our bracket, 30 minus, what's 9 plus 16? It'd be 25. All right, then let's look at the bottom. On the bottom, we only have one decision. What's 10 minus 6? That's all we have to do. So 4. All right, now let's go to another step. So once again, we still have to do what's in these brackets first. Those brackets are basically trying to tell us, they're trying to raise alarms and say, hey, do what's inside of these brackets first, then worry about everything else. Okay, so then we'll worry about the 12. Now, we'll bring 12 over. 30 minus 25 is going to be 5. So we basically have 12 times 5 over 4 is just by itself, so it's over 4. All right, so now let me rewrite that just so we can be on the same page. So 12, we have our bracket still, 5 all over 4. Now, on the top, we just need to multiply 12 times 5, which is going to give me 60, divided by 4. Now I'm ready to divide to end this off, or to finish this off. So 60 divided by 4 is going to give me 15, and I'm finished. Now, I know that's a long problem. I know that that's probably a little too much, but it gives you an idea of how crazy these can get. But once again, your order of operations, P, E, M, D, A, S. PEMDAS is going to help you significantly with this. The first thing you're going to do is your parentheses. The second thing you're going to do is your exponents. Then you're going to multiply and divide, but you're going to do that from left to right. And then the same thing with adding and subtracting. You're going to do that from left to right. right? And then if you have questions, reach out. But this is order of operations.